So it's wonderful to be here, and I can't think of a better way to tee up our conversation with the remarks that we just heard from the Commissioner and so many fantastic examples. I'm joined by some fantastic panelists, and what I want to do is ask them each a question in the context of their bios and backgrounds so that we can have a conversation both about the obvious challenges, but the opportunities and how we begin to bring real solutions to the table. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order here because I think there's some great foundational knowledge in some of the work, Susan, that McKinsey has done. You and our organization partnered on a report that really cuts to the heart of the reason why connectivity matters, both economically and socially, around global digital flows. And there's a wonderful quote in there that I want to read and then have you talk a little bit about why this is such an imperative given where the economy is going in a digital age. So the quote says, "Global flows are creating new degrees of connectedness among economies and playing an ever larger role in determining the fate of nations, companies, and individuals. To be unconnected is to fall behind." So I'd love to have you share more about some of the key findings from that report and why connectivity is so important, particularly as our economy barrels towards the digital age.
I would love to. I could talk all day about it, but I'll be very brief. We'll have copies of this report. It's called Digital Globalization, A New Era of Global Flows, available at the side table for anyone who wants to pick it up. And what we've done in this report is look at the different ways in which countries and cities and regions are connected around the world. And the traditional way we think about globalization is trading goods. So our image is often of a big container ship of goods coming possibly from Asia to a port in the United States. But increasingly, that type of physical trading goods is not the way the world is connected. Instead, it's through cross-border data flows, digital connections. And this data flowing across the world includes everything. It's the Skype call between the US and India that we just heard about. It's people using Facebook. It's small businesses reaching out to customers around the world. And it's all the communication that goes on within companies from everyone in this room. It's all lumped together, but we've done a lot of statistical work to look at what's the value and contribution to economic growth. And we find two amazing things. One is that these global interconnections collectively add at least 10% towards world GDP. So that's $7.8 trillion in 2014. And then when we look at, well, what types of connections are creating the most value, we find that already these cross-border data flows account for more of the value than global trading goods. Now that's pretty astounding considering that, say, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there were no cross-border data flows. It didn't even exist. We were in an analog world. And so in the matter of 2 decades, the economic value created by these digital connections has exceeded that of global trade that's been going on for centuries. So that is the beginning of this new digital era we're in. It is democratizing, as we heard Commissioner Pai say. Our research underscores that, and indeed the survey we did with Donna and startups at 1776 and around the world show that companies today are born global. We look at the ways in which new platforms like eBay and PayPal and Alibaba and Amazon open up the possibility for small businesses around the world to export. So this is no longer a game just for big global multinational corporations. And there's even economic value in individuals going across borders to, for instance, take courses online, to market their talents and skills, to get work through platforms like freelancer.com, or for small businesses to raise money through, say, Kickstarter. So those are just some of the ways in which economic value is being created. But increasingly, it's this digital connectivity that is the tissue that's creating a global economy.
Great, thank you. Ben, you're joining us from Facebook, and I'd love for you to add on to anything that Susan has shared, but also to talk about potentially the societal impact that exists and some of the programmatic ways that Facebook is really driving to try to engage to increase connectivity around the world.
Yeah, great. So at Facebook, when we think about connectivity, our whole goal is figuring out how to bring more people online. So, and kind of taking a step back, so you can think about the economic benefits of why people need to be online, and companies being able to reach more customers, people being able to, developers bringing their sites online. But apart from the, beyond the economic impact of it, really has social impact too on people, on how they live their lives. So if you think about health information, Commissioner Pai earlier mentioned health apps, for telemedicine. Medicine, women's health, we see a lot of, on our connectivity initiatives, people using women's health sites, job sites, education tools. So you really see other ways just beyond job growth and economic development, how it impacts people's lives. As we think about how you bring more people online, we think about what the key barriers are to bringing people onto the internet. Even today, almost 60% of the world's population still isn't online. And so, as we think about the solutions to this, there's not really one size fits all remedy. It really depends on what the barrier is in a particular region or a particular country or in that market. And so as we think through the different barriers, we see in certain areas of the world, there might be a lack of infrastructure. So if you think about sub-Saharan Africa, why people aren't being able to get online in the first place, it's because it's not available. Some people might not be able to get online because it's just not affordable. The cost of data is too high for them to do it. But you also see people, and a big portion of the people who aren't coming online, they live in areas where they have coverage, so there's infrastructure there. Some of the people can afford it. They could afford at least some data to come online. But they're not doing it because they don't really see they're not aware of the value of it, the relevance of it to them. Why would they want to be online? Why would they want to go and spend money on data to come online in the first place? Because they haven't done it before and they don't really see the relevance. So as we come up with solutions to those, again, there's no silver bullet, there's no one size fits all program, but we're trying to tackle those issues with different initiatives. So I thought it would be helpful I can give a brief overview of some of the things we're working on. So when you think about the infrastructure barrier, we're looking at how technologies can be used in different ways in different parts of the world to bring backhaul, to bring connectivity in areas where there's just not infrastructure. So if you think about satellites being used, we've been working on high altitude solar planes. So these are big, lightweight, bigger wingspan, bigger than a 737, but very lightweight, weighs less than a small car. Solar powered, so they can stay aloft for several months at a time, and could be flown around in areas providing backhaul where there's just not that infrastructure. If you think about the affordability and awareness barriers, though, it needs different solutions. So we're experimenting with programs like our Free Basics program, which is basically where we partner with mobile operators to provide an open platform that lets developers, any developer who wants to participate can put their site on there as long as they meet technical guidelines, and it gives people free access to basic services, basically low bandwidth basic services. So if you think about health sites, again, job sites, education tools, and what we see is a lot of the people who come online quickly go on to buy some data, the people who can afford it. We see half of the people who come online within a month of doing this start paying for some data to access the full internet. So that's kind of a quick overview of the programs that we're working on for those barriers and kind of how we see the challenges.
Great, thank you. So Harold, building on Susan and Ben's comments around both the importance and the barriers, I'm especially curious in your perspectives on the U.S. competitive angle. As we move towards a digital economy, we've been talking a lot about the importance of getting everyone connected and what does that mean for the developing world. But when we think about U.S. competitiveness, what does that mean from your perspective, and how does connectivity really matter? What becomes really critical there?
Oh, well, thank you very much, and thank you, CED, for having me on this panel. It's great to be here. The U.S. role in the internet and connectivity is it's paradoxical in a way, in the following sense. I hope that wasn't me. The United States is in many ways the most connected country in the world, and yet over the past 15 years, our economy has been one of the slowest growing in the world. much of the rest of the world, the internet has actually allowed people to leapfrog, to have billions of people move from a subsistence level into something that begins to approach the middle class. And that's all happened in the past 20 years. It is one of the most amazing developments in human history. It's also something that is, and I hate to say this will sound very nationalistic, but the internet is an amazingly American invention. And let me just put some numbers on this. If you look at the Department of Commerce, the Census Bureau they're very good at defining industries. They have 25 pages, I kid you not, 25 pages of definitions of software and software-related industries and internet-related industries. And if you go by each one of those around the world leader in almost every one of those industries is an American company. The three largest corporations in the world today, Apple, Alphabet or Google, and Microsoft, none of those existed 30 years ago, and they're all internet related. 5 of the largest corporations in the world are those 3, plus Facebook and Amazon. And then if you look below that, a lot of the new major corporations, there isn't a single major internet-related corporation in the world that is not an American corporation. It's true you have small enterprises developing around the world. As Commissioner Pai described, chances are, if they're very good, they're going to get bought up by an American corporation. If you are a bright, young engineer somewhere around the world, you may develop locally, or you're figuring out, how do I get to America? The magnetism of the internet in America is just amazing. The beneficiaries of that are primarily outside of the United States. It's the billions of people who have leapfrogged into the middle class because of this, frankly, fairly American product called the internet. And yet, we in the United States, we have not, I would argue, have not really benefited as much as the rest of the world has from this invention called the internet.
So let's start talking solutions. We've identified barriers. Let's talk more about barriers we may not have already discussed. And then what are the solutions? What is it that we recommend the policymakers be looking at? And what should the private sector be doing? Where are the opportunities for public-private partnerships? And I'll open it to any one of you to comment.
I mean, I'd start in part with barriers and what are the solutions. I mean, even the United States, despite arguably being the world leader in internet technologies and adoption of the internet, we're still very early in the stages of how digitization is going to transform every industry. Another piece of research done by the McKinsey Global Institute, released last December, it's called Digital America, and it's looking sector by sector of the economy. How much does each sector utilize digital assets? How much does it invest in giving digital tools to its workforce? And how much has it introduced digitization into its operations? And on those 3 categories of metrics, we find that, not surprisingly, the ICT industry itself and finance and insurance are highly digitized industries, but that for huge parts of the economy, including healthcare, education, government, hospitality, retail, most companies have barely begun to utilize the potential of digital. So overall, we concluded that the US is about 20% as digitized as it could be. That's actually good news. I'm an economist by training, and one of the things you've probably heard about recently is about why is productivity growth so slow? When are we going to see a productivity pickup? And bringing more digital tools to more of the economy is going to be part of that. Now, how to do it? Part of it is just an evolution. We're at the early days. If you think about any major invention like electricity and the steam engine, it took decades for that to roll out and transform the way business was done. And so part of it is simply time, but the other part is access, not only in the US to those without access, but around the world, even in the parts of Africa, for instance, or other low-income countries where they have access to the internet and data, it's extremely expensive. In Lagos, Nigeria, the cost of data access is 21 times the cost it is in London. So the world's poorest people have to pay the most. So that clearly needs to change, and that's a combination of public policies as well as private sector investments.
It's interesting when you look at what the least connected communities look like. They tend to be rural, low-income, elderly, and female-oriented. So some of the most vulnerable aspects of the population. One of the barriers that we haven't really addressed is user capability. There's been some studies done around the fact that incentives, affordability, infrastructure all matter, but in the cases where those things are aligned, the educational levels, literacy levels also matter a lot. I'm curious if any of you have a comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a big part of it. And so, when I was talking about our Free Basics program, it's focused on giving people an opportunity to come online and actually use some of the sites. So one component, that's not the solution, that's not the total solution. It's the solution, that's important for getting people online and giving them a chance to work with the sites and see how it impacts their lives at first. But there need to be other, parts of the solution too, which, digital literacy programs, teaching people how to use the sites, but we think of the first step is being able to get the people online, and a component of that is making sure that they're having the skills and understanding how to use it too. And I was just going to make another comment, just in terms of how to bring people online and get them connected. Another component that I didn't really touch on before is it can't just be global services that are available to people. Like that's not the only. You can't just have that as the incentive. And a big part of it is having locally relevant services and content for people too. Like if you're talking about around the world, people to show that relevance and to impact people's lives, to connect them, to have health information and those types of services. A key part of it is working with the developers there to have those local services, to have things that are really part of that community, rather than just global services too.
Yeah, we find that to be so true. I mean, we work with thousands of entrepreneurs and startups around the world every year, and they are recognizing that they can access the internet and open source entrepreneurial methods, and they tend to be tackling those local problems that are right in front of them, which aren't, dry cleaning on demand sort of solutions. They're education and healthcare and access to energy and transportation solutions. And it's the areas that Susan was mentioning where, true digitization is yet to come, and in many cases, they have the ability to leapfrog, where we have big institutions that deal with those services here in the U.S. So it'll be interesting to see where the digital economy takes us in those industries. Yeah.
I would just add, I think if you put the internet in the hands of teenagers and 20-year-olds, they do amazing things with it. And a lot of times it's mostly just being sure the government doesn't stop them from using it. If you think about some of the largest economies in the world that have actually tried to limit the use of the internet or to use the internet to spy on their people, it's both a human tragedy, but it's also an economic tragedy, because you'll find in these countries that the information sector is really not developing as rapidly or as well as it could. And I don't have to name what some of those countries are, but having the government try to use the internet for bad purposes is a very bad thing.
I say, before we open to the group for questions, I loved the question that Lisa, who was the moderator on the last panel, asked, and so I'm simply going to steal that from her. I do agree. I think it's important around call to action. We have very powerful people in this room, in both the public and private sector. What should the people in this room be walking out of here doing as a next step?
So I think there's a lot of room for partnership. I mean, this is a huge issue. Connectivity isn't something that just one company or one organization can solve. So I think that it's finding innovative ways together and finding partnerships to advance that. I talked about the projects we're working on, but part of that's, there's room for, it's opening up platforms, opening up ways for businesses, for communities to connect. And I think that opening up that dialogue and figuring out ways to work together is the most important first step.
I would say, as business leaders, think digital. Think about how it applies to your company, your operations, your labor force. Rethink how business can be done and completely reorganized using digital technologies, whether it's the Internet of Things and sensors on machines or basic connectivity across your company and with suppliers. But I know that CED also attracts business leaders who care about the world economy and social issues as well as their own operations. And so on that front, I would call for people in this room to think about digital access in low-income countries, especially those that maybe weren't manufacturing powerhouses in the last wave of globalization. They missed out on building the physical infrastructure, logistics, ports, airports that they needed. Well, that's still on their to-do agenda, but now they've got another digital infrastructure that they've got to build out. And that's just as important and arguably even more important going forward.
I would say if you're in business in America, you're in business on the internet already. Our government sometimes is a little slow capturing technology. It's certainly less than 1% of GDP is generated by quote unquote software or internet companies. The other 99% are actually internet companies. They're just not being called that by our government. I would agree with everything that's been said on the panel. There is an awful lot of opportunity at very low cost to make internet access available in creative ways in every community in America.
Great, and I'll add my 2 cents, which is everything they said. Plus, I think one aspect that we didn't touch on, and I think it's important for people to understand, is also the diplomatic angle to this. So one of the things that we find is when you find that entrepreneurs and startups around the world are using internet access and digital technologies to not only be innovative and disrupt an industry, they are also interacting with their counterparts around the world as a natural part of their business. And there's an enormous diplomatic angle to that as well. So it's economic, it's social, it's diplomatic. There's something in there for everyone. So every one of us has an imperative to be a part of helping solve the problem. So I want to open it up for questions. I think we've got some microphones running around. We've got one up here in the front, actually a couple in the front, so.
Thank you so much. I'm Paula Stern, a CED trustee, and I'm going to ask this question on behalf of the National Center for Women and Information Technology and ask you to please imagine what the internet would be, from any point of view you might want to answer the question. If we had a gender diverse creators of information technology, and not just users of the internet, how would it be different economically for the U.S.? What would we be producing differently? How would the world be any different if we had creators who were gender diverse?
So I can start by just saying the more diversity in the people who are creating the programs and the developers, the better. Not just with gender, but also race. I mean, any diversity. And it's something Facebook's really focused on in terms of who's brought into that community, who has the tools. Starting out at a very educational level with students and having programs to educate them and to bring them into with that skill set, and then also who Facebook hires. It's something that we're really focused on because we think the more voices who are in at the ground level of development, the better. And I think it's, we see it in terms of access issues to what sites are online because, Free Basics, what we've seen is once we open up that platform and local developers start putting their sites on, things that are focused toward women's issues, women's health, are some of the biggest demand, like the most used sites there. And there's really a lack of those services that we see, and that's one of the, we see that as one of the problems that we're trying to solve too, so on both ends, the diversity of who's developing it, but also of the types of services that are available. So it's something we're focused on and totally agree that it's an important issue.
If you've seen any output or any differences or what you're expecting to see. But the health example is a good one. Thank you.
I would just add to that if you look at the data around entrepreneurship, women actually start businesses at a higher rate than men, but they don't scale to the degree that male-led businesses do, and they provide higher levels of return on capital when they do scale. So when we think about opportunity for economic creation and economic development, one of the biggest levers that we have is not only encouraging more of these women to be part of the development and creative economy, it is as developers, it is also as entrepreneurs, and getting them equipped with the tools to actually take those ideas to scale. Because there's also social impact. Women do tend to start businesses that have a double bottom line focus more frequently than men. So it's a big lever, and definitely also an opportunity for the connected economy.
Yeah, I would add that it would be a great lever for inclusiveness. One of the new projects we're looking at is a potential for digital payments to lead to broader digital financial inclusion among poor people in poor countries. And one of the things that's been shown many times over is that when you give women in particular access to a digital payment account where they can save money that nobody can see, their extended family, their siblings, their husband doesn't have access to, they save more and then they invest more in education and healthcare. So it could be, again, a way to leapfrog ahead in development, to have more gender inclusion in internet usage, if not development.
We had a question over here.
Hi, John Spector from the conference board. I just moved to the center of Vermont. And I have high-speed internet access because I live in the large metropolis of Woodstock, which has a population of 3,000. Vermont is the second, by a smidgen, the second smallest state, second lowest population in the U.S. And the state government has made it a priority, for all the reasons you described, to wire the whole state. But it doesn't seem to be happening very quickly. And at the state level, Vermont is actually a pretty well-run state. I suspect it's the economics. What are the economics of wiring the rest of the country, whatever that amounts to? It certainly amounts to a big part of Vermont.
Well, first of all, there are a lot of ways to provide broadband connectivity. You can wire it with fiber, but there are a lot of wireless solutions that in some geographies might be more efficient. I haven't studied the Vermont geography, but I suspect there are wireless solutions there as well. It's going to happen. It may take a few years longer in Vermont than in other parts of the country, but I have no doubt that Vermont, as well as just about every other part of America, is going to have extraordinary broadband connectivity.
There were a couple hands further back.
I'm Barry Stern. I'm an education and workforce development consultant. In the spirit of getting out of silos that Janice talked about this morning, I'm not sure this would be on your radar screen because my question has to do with cellular biology. There's a growing body of evidence that growing amounts of electromagnetic radiation are having deleterious effects on cells, on people's health, on chronic diseases like Alzheimer's, autism, Parkinson's, and so forth. Is this on anyone's radar screen in your industry?
I will tell you it was a specific provision in the 1996 Telecommunications Act that I worked on that transferred federal oversight of this specific issue and centralized it at the FCC. Now, some people might say that was a mistake, but I too have seen studies that are increasingly coming along looking at this. I don't know what the answer is, but there are people in the federal government who are looking at this, and obviously, if there are health concerns, that'll be a concern to everybody.
Other questions? Going once? Going twice? All right. Well, thank you to my panelists for your comments and to the audience for your wonderful questions.